In this video, I'm going to just do a very quick demonstration of how to actually run the grid variance program. After the installation is complete, there'll be a shortcut on the desktop to allow you to run the program. But in addition to that, you'll also find it on the Windows menu. So if you just go down to the Windows menu and scroll down to the section G, you'll find Grid Variance Analysis menu. When you expand that menu, you'll find access to not only to the program, but to a lot of documentation, including the installation instructions, the operating instructions, and a host of other things. In future versions, you'll also find a link to all of these training videos. But to start the program, we just click the shortcut. It will take about 8 to 10 seconds on the first occasion to open up the program, so it's just a matter of being patient and waiting for it to start. And when it does start, it'll generally start with the way you left it on the previous occasion. So the program is now started, and as you can see, it's exactly the same as in the instruction videos. Now, just to make the screen a little bit larger, I'm just going to collapse the ribbon at the top, so don't really need that. I'm going to start by entering a suburb, and in this particular case I'm going to select Wynnum in Queensland. Once I've entered the name of the location that I want, I just select the state from the drop down list. It's a relatively simple process. And as you can see, the area that I had up the top has disappeared. It's automatically filled the postcode and the local government area. Now I need to make a few other selections. Now, I don't want to process surrounding suburbs at this stage, so I've selected no, which means that it will just process Wynnum. In my property type option, I've selected house, which is just a matter of selecting house from the drop-down list, and I've selected residential rather than commercial. In the next selection, I want to include some sold properties just to get some history. This is a fairly large suburb with a lot of movement, so I'll just select the days as 90. I don't want to analyse all the sales history. The renovation feasibility study there that you see there doesn't do anything at the moment. It's for future development. Process alerts I'll leave as no, and I want to do sales and not rentals. Now, once I've done this selection, all I need to do at this point is just go up to this button up here and click on process selection. When I do that, if you watch the corner down the bottom, you'll see that it tells you what it's doing. It's retrieving data from the ABS. There are 46 records it has to retrieve. Once it's retrieved those 46 records, these are the number of current listings in Wynnum. It will update the screen periodically as it does the calculations. After it's processed all 46 of the current listings, it will then go to the previous sales. It'll process through till it completes the search for the 90 days. Once it's done that, as you can see on the screen now, there are 68 properties in total now in the listing. 65 have been priced. It's calculated the average low, the average mid and the average high price ranges, as well as the percentage variations between those numbers. One important aspect of this particular program is that in this location there are 5,536 dwellings, and that represents 0.83% of the total number of dwellings. Now, the state average is normally 1%. It's within fairly close proximity to the 1%, so I would expect that these numbers to be fairly well accurate. If the range was outside of the 1%, say anywhere outside of 0.8 to 1.2%, then we need to analyse exactly what's going on in this suburb, whether it's an oversupply situation or lack of demand. But there's a very key element in this number. Now we can start looking at some of the other results. Now, the first thing I draw your attention to is these numbers in red up in the top left-hand corner. There are 10 properties in a range of 175,000 to 795,000. So that means there are 10 properties between the average low. Now, even though the percentages are fairly close, I would have hoped to have seen a percentage variations of in excess of 30%. The fact that there are at least 10 properties below the average low means that there's at least 10 properties worth looking at to see if there's a potential for renovation. So the next step is just to go to the results sheet And when we go to the results sheet, we can see all of the properties that are available and or sold. So if we scroll down, you'll see the sold ones at the bottom to give us an indication of just exactly what's going on here. Now, one thing to remember is that there were 46 properties available or currently listed and 22 sold in the last 90 days. So that means the current stock would probably turn over in about 6 months. Now that's a fairly lengthy average days on the market, but the ones that have sold on average of 24.4 days on the market. So there's clearly an active market here for the right kind of property. We just need to know what that is and whether we can buy low and sell in a price range where we're going to make a profit. Now there are a lot of properties in this list that are highlighted yellow, which is basically a price estimated situation. The program has not been able to determine a price, so it's just estimated a price. Now, with this number of estimated prices, it tends to make the numbers a little bit unreliable, and we need to make sure that when we're looking at these prices that the estimates are in fact reasonable in the circumstances. You'll notice that all of the prices are color coded, and as I've explained in a previous video, the color code indicates where their price point is. The white or light grey ones are all those priced below the average low. The green ones are the ones that are priced between the average mid and the average low. The orange ones are the ones that are priced between the average mid and the average high, and the red ones are all of those priced above the average high. Now this is exactly the same as we see on a set of traffic lights. Red at the top, amber in the middle, green at the bottom, and white at the very bottom, which is often used for buses and trams on our traffic lights. The ones that are a dark grey or a black are the ones where no price has been able to be determined. What we also have on this screen is the ability to link to the actual listing, the property listing, or the property profile. And all we need to do to be able to do that is just to select any row on the column that we want to go to and then say link to listing, and that'll take us to the real estate listing for that particular property. If we find a property that looks attractive in this particular list, say like the $749,000 property here, it's a 3-bed, 2-bath, 6 car, so it's on a fairly large block. It's a little bit unusual, but that's obviously one that we would need to investigate. And there are a number of other properties here that are in the below the $800,000 mark that will probably all be worth looking at. This one in particular, which is on 513 square meters, is a 2-bed, 1-bath. So what we would need to be doing here is looking at the potential to increase that to 3 beds, 2 baths, and what likely price point we could get if we were able to do that. And the way we do that is to go to the statistics sheet. Now the statistics sheet gives us a breakdown of the number of beds and baths. So what we can do in this particular price point, what we're looking at that price point there was that it's 2-bed. What we found was it was a 2-bed bath, so it's the median price for 2-bed baths in this area is $753,000. So if we were to increase the number of beds, we could potentially put it up into the orange group. So it's a 3-bed, and what we're looking at there, the median price is 1.13 million. So there's an enormous amount of scope for a property like that if it has the potential to increase the number of beds and potentially the number of baths as well. So on the statistics sheet we get a fairly good view of just exactly what the uplift is in terms of price, but not only in terms of price but in terms of volume. So when we look at the top section here, which is all of the properties together regardless of their price points, we see that the biggest seller is the 3 bedrooms. There's 24 3 bedrooms have been sold or available in this area, and 21 4 bedrooms. So this is clearly where the largest part of the market is. When we look at bathrooms, generally it's in the 2 baths, so 1 or 2 baths. So that's where the market is in this particular suburb. Now once we get to the point where we can where we've determined that there is some potential in this suburb, there's a number of other things we can look at, and I'll cover those in more detail later. But for example, the profile sheet will give us a breakdown of the demographics in the area. If we're looking at going ahead, just exactly what these demographics would tell us in terms of growth. And as you can see, it gives us trends in terms of population, trends in terms of median prices for 3-bed houses and 4-bed houses, a lot of other statistics including median rents, auction results, and a whole lot of data here is available for us if we get this far. We can also go to the agency sheet. The agency sheet gives us an exact copy of the results sheet, just in order of listing agent. When we go down to the bottom of the listing agents, we can see here the best performing agents in the area are highlighted in yellow, and both in terms of prices sold and properties listed. So we get a fairly good idea of just exactly who are the best performing real estate agents in the area. The Resi filter sheet, which I've also mentioned in the instructions, this is another copy of the results sheet, but at the top all of these headings are available to sort. So if we wanted to sort by property size, for example, all we need to do is just say from smallest to largest, and that's exactly what we get. So we can look at the properties in that sequence, and then we can start looking at not only the properties that are available at the right price point for the potential to renovate, but also perhaps down here where we've got 600 square metre properties where there's a potential to subdivide. Now I'm going to go back to the selections at this point, the selection sheet, because there's a number of very important options in terms of output, which is where the real action is when it comes to determining whether there are opportunities in the area or not. Now all of the options available on the selection sheet are all via the buttons here, and we've got things like add the list of favourites. So if we wanted to include this in a regular search, then all we need to do is say add this to favourites, and then periodically process our favourites. There's a very simple function here that allows us to draw a circle on Google Maps. So if you're looking for anything within a particular distance of a location, then there's a facility here to allow you to do that. But by and large, the most important one here is this one at the top, and that's output to Google Maps. I'll just click output to Google Maps, and again, if you watch down the bottom, you'll find that it tells you exactly what's going on. But it's a very, very quick process to transfer all of the data to Google Maps. And on Google Maps, what you'll find is exactly what we've seen on the results sheet, with all of the properties marked as with an icon, and the icon has the same color coding as what you see on the results sheet. Anything that's sold has the same color coding, but it has an S in it, so the sold properties with an S. Now you'll also notice a number of borders. The red border is the suburb border, that's the Wynnum suburb border. The green border that you can see here is the council area. If you were to select by postcode, you would find there would be a different border, a different colour, and same for school zones, there would be a different border and a different colour. But what we can do now is we can have a fairly close look at what's been selling in the area. And one of the things that we can see now quite quickly is up the top here. There are two properties that are sold here that have been sold in the high range. These are both coloured red, so they've been sold above the average high, and yet we have a green one here which is within only a few hundred meters of it, and this has been sold or is available between the average mid and the average low. So if we looked at, say, one of these properties, it looks like a relatively new property. It's sold for 1.4 million, and this one looks like a fairly standard single level house, 1.5 million. We look at this one that's available now. Oops, just get rid of that, and that's that house there. That's 888,000. So while this one may be out of range, this one for 888,000, we need to ask ourselves whether it on a 415 square metre block with 3 beds and 2 baths, whether we can turn it into something that looks like that for 1.5 million. Probably not in this particular case, but that's what we need to be looking for. And when we go down to the bottom here again, we can see properties that are sold or available in the high price range, very, very close to properties that are this particular property, for example, has been sold in a much lower price range. So it's very, very easy to identify where the potential is in any one suburb. Now there's a couple of things that we can do on this screen. If we were to have selected by postcode, for example, that would cover or potentially cover a multitude of properties in different suburbs. So we can actually select the suburb up here if we wanted to narrow the search. If we only want to look at the 3-bed houses, then we can just click that on or go back to all categories. If we want to only look at the properties that are sold, then we can just click sold or all categories. If we've processed any alerts, then we can look at any alerts, and we'll discuss that in some of the other videos. If we want to go to a specific address, then we can just go down on the list here and it'll show us exactly where that property is. And again, if we want more information about this property, we just click more details, and that will take us to the real estate advertisement. There's one other feature, and that's the ability to draw circles on the map. So Wynnum, for example, has a railway station somewhere. I never remember where it is, but it's down here somewhere. If we wanted to find out all of the properties within a 1 kilometre radius of the railway line or the Wynnum railway station, we can just click there, and that'll, after I've changed that to 1, it'll just give us a circle around the Wynnum railway station, so we can see which properties are within 1 kilometre radius, or we can change that to metres if we wanted to do it in terms of metres. To remove the circle, we just do a right. We also have all of the facilities that come with Google Mapping. We can change to a satellite view if we want to. That gives us this sort of satellite view, and we can go to street view if we wanted to go to. Now at this point, I'm just going to get rid of the map and go back to the selection screen. We can output the results sheets to a PDF if we want to. We can export the raw data to a CSV file if we want to do our own analysis. We can output this result sheet to a PDF. We can also output to Google Earth. Now the Google Earth output is quite different from the Google Maps, and I'll explain that when I go to it. We can also go to Google Earth with heat maps. Now I'll just going to do that particular function. When Google Earth finally displays, it does take a little bit of time sometimes. You'll see that it's essentially the same as the Google Maps output, with the same icons in the same area and the same borders. Everything's the same, except there's now coloured sections which are a heat map of the property prices. So, and a legend that explains where the property price points are. So as we can see, Wynnum has a lower price point than a neighbouring suburb of Manly, and there are Wynnum West and Manly West, for example, which are obviously further away from the coast and are lower price points again. So when we click on one of these areas, we get a breakdown of the property price movements over the last 13 months, with the annual growth both shown as annual growth and the last quarter growth for each of the suburbs. So we can see where the price movements are for each of the suburbs, and we can identify quite quickly the suburbs which have a lower price point. This suburb, for example, is falling well behind the prices of all of the neighbouring suburbs. So as a suburb, it may be worth looking at. Now the way Google Earth works is relatively quite different from Google Maps, because it displays in layers. So each layer can be turned on or off. So if we want to take the heat map layer off, we can just simply turn that off. What we also have is a similar map, which is based on price growth. So what we can see here is which properties have had the highest or the lowest growth over the previous 13 months. What we can also do is what's called heat circles. Now this heat circles displays the property prices, or the properties icons at least, but with heat maps. So where we can see if there are areas of higher growth than areas of lower prices rather, and we can turn off the property icons as well. So what we get here is an indication of where the higher priced properties are. Now quite clearly this is waterfront, so what we're obviously going to see properties with higher prices closer to the water. Put that back on and that back on. So what we have now is exactly what we had. Once I've finished with the mapping, I can just get rid of the mapping, discard that, go back to the original selection sheet, and at this point there's a number of other different options that were explained in the other videos. For example, links to various websites based on the selection that you've made. Various other options that you can use by selecting by postcode and by walking distance or schools. So there are a number of different options just to make it a little bit easier for you to narrow down the kind of properties and the areas that you want to investigate. That ends this section. Thanks for listening.